All right, so week 3, day 2 of this stuff is interpreting sequences. I know it says functions, but these are sequences. Um, and we're just going to go over how to identify which answers are correct based on the information they give you. Okay, so we'll start working on a couple. I know we only have like half an hour. So we'll do, I think there's 12 questions. Is that right? Yeah. So we'll try to do at least 6 and then give you guys the other 6 to do for homework. So which ones do you guys want to try, the even or the odds? Odds? Okay, so we'll go with 1. So it says, consider the sequence whose first 5 terms are shown below. And the sequence, again, this is from your question number 1 here. 8, 6, 4, 2, and 0. Which function with a domain of n equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 defines this function? Okay, so it sounds kind of weird, but what they're saying is, if my domain is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, remember, domain represents which letters, X or Y's? Remember yesterday we talked about it? So which one was your domain, your X values or your Y values? The X's, right? Domain was your X's. So they're saying if X is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, your Y values will come out to 8, 6, 4, 2, and 0 in that order. So when X is 1, Y would be 8. When X is 2, Y would be 6, etc. So all I got to do is look at my equations and plug them in and see which ones work. So let me try part A. Okay, 8 is connected to 1, okay? And 6 is connected to 2. And 4 is connected to 3. All right, I'll just do one more. 2 is connected to 4. Okay, these are what are connected together. Do I have to do all these calculations? Not really. I just got to maybe do 2 of them just to make sure. Okay, so let's start off with the easiest number to plug in. Again, it says my domain is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's start with 1. Let me plug in a 1. So I'm going to plug it into my part A. Let's see if it works. So if I plug in a 1 into part A, it comes out to 2, negative 2 times 1 plus 10. Well, negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, and negative 2 plus 10, that's positive 8. Did that seem to work right? When I plugged in a 1, I got an 8? Yeah, right? If I plug in a 1, I'm supposed to get an 8 from my Y value. So far, so good. But I can't just base my answers off of one solution. So the first one worked. Now let me see if plugging in a 2 gives me a 6. So I'm still working with just A. I'm working with this one right here, okay? So f of 2 is equal to negative 2 times 2. That's what I got to plug in. Plus 10. That's negative 4 plus 10. That equals to 6. Is that supposed to be the right number? I plug in a 2, I get a 6? Yeah. So that means my answer is A. If it would have not worked, then I would have checked part B. Okay? And if that would have not worked, then I would have checked the next one. Okay? Now, if you want a little hint as to how things go, you could use slopes and figure out slopes and stuff. But like I said, that takes a little bit more time. So it's easier just to plug in numbers really quick. And a lot of times you can just do it in your head. You don't have to show the work. And you can figure out what works. And notice I didn't know A was going to be the answer, so that's why I started with that. I just started with A because it's in alphabetical order. If A would have not worked, I would have gone to B. If that would have not worked, I would have gone to C. Okay, and again, I may have not done all my calculations little by little. I probably could have done some of this stuff in my head, like B and D look like I can do that in my head, no problem. Right? If I plug in a 1 into, let's say, D, negative 1 plus 9, that's 8. That seems to work, right? 1 and 8, that works. But what if I plug in a 2? So that'd be negative 2 plus 9, that's 7. Am I supposed to get a 7 when I plug in a 2? No, I'm supposed to get a 6. So that's why D would have not worked. Because maybe the first one worked, second one did not work. That's why I told you don't just plug it in once and say, oh, that worked just fine. Because Notice if that's the case, then you would have said D would have been the answer. And that would have been wrong. Okay? Always try at least 2 numbers. Okay? At least 2 numbers. So let's move on. By the way, I know we're not going to do question number 2, but you see right there, they say 1 minute, you get 74. 2 minutes, you get 73. 3 minutes, you get 72. In other words, plug in a 1 and your answer should be 74. Plug in a 2, your answer should be 73. Check those with those equations. See which one makes sense. Okay? So you're just going to want to check them. Don't let the fact that it's a word problem mess you up. They're just doing relationships between X and Y values. That's all. So let's look at this one. Consider the sequence whose first 5 terms are half, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, and 1/32. Which function can be used to determine the nth term sequence? In other words, which one of these formulas results in a half, a fourth, an eighth, a 16th, and 1/32? So all you got to do is plug in 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You don't have to do all of them, but that would be your order, right? 1 for the first term, 2 for the second term, 3 for the third term, etc. So let's try A. Since we're doing this stuff in alphabetical, we'll start with that, and then if we don't like our answer, then we can jump to another one. But let's try A. So if I plug in a 1 into A, what's my answer? I get -2 times 1. That's -2. Does that match half? No. So that means A is not an answer. Which one else do you want to try? B, C, or D? C? All right, let's try C. Plug in f of 1. That's 1/2 times 1. That's a half. Does that match? Yeah, but can I base my answer based on only one solution? No. So that means I get to plug in my next number, which is going to be 2, right? We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How do I know to use those? They said the first 5 terms, meaning term number 1, term number 2, term number 3, right? So to find our next term, f of 2, that's 1/2 times 2. That's 1/4. Does that match? Yeah, and if you want to be sure, plug in a 3. Well, that's going to be, if I plug in the third one, just to kind of show you what happens here, I get 1/6. Does that match? No. It looked good, but it didn't happen, right? Well, which one else do you want to try? B? All right, now let me fix this equation for you, and then maybe you might want to switch which one you want to try. What happens when you have a negative power? What happens to the number? They flip. So this equation is actually 2 to the n, and this equation is actually 1/2 to the n. Or actually, let me write it this way. I think I told you to do it this way. So now that you know that my 2 equations look like this or like this, which one do you think would give me better chances of fractions? D, right? So let's plug it in. Let's plug it into D here. F of 1 into this thing here, it'd be 1/2 to the first. That's a half. That looks good so far. Let's plug in a 2. F of 2 would be 1/2 squared, which is 1/4. That seems to work just fine. Now here's the deciding number. What about 3? F of 3, that would be 1/2 to the third, which is 1/8. Does that match? Yeah, it's 1/8. So there we go. It's got to be D. All right, this is where I tell you, 1 is not enough. 2 is better. Okay? But sometimes 2 isn't enough either. So 3, for sure, we'll check to make sure everything's working just fine. Okay? Because if I would have not checked the third term, I would have gotten B as my answer, or sorry, not B, C as my answer, and not even thought about it. Right? Because I would have said the first 2 work. That's perfect. right? Sometimes people say, well, why don't you try the first term and the last term? That's another way to check 2 terms only and see if it works. You can do first and last. I prefer going first, second, third because the numbers are smaller. I don't want to plug in f of 5, right? Those are big numbers sometimes. So, all right, so there's question number 3. Again, I'm just testing things, right? That's all I'm doing. All right, the first 5 terms of a sequence are shown below. So 125, 100, 80, 64, 51.2. Which of the following functions define and continue the sequence for all integers n greater than or equal to 1? In other words, start with 1, then go to 2, then go to 3, then go to 4, go to 5, etc., right? So if I plug in a 1, my answer should come out to 125. If I plug in a 2, my answer should come out to 100. If I plug in a 3, I should get 80. Okay? So now I'm going to look at my equations. All right, there's a bunch of weird looking ones. Which one do you want to try to see if it works? Do I want to just start with A blindly or maybe make a better decision? I can start with anything. So how about I just start with something that looks easy, part C. Okay, let's start with part C. Calculators might be helpful sometimes, by the way, just so you know. So if I start with part C, f of 1, that's 150 minus 25, which is 125. That looks good so far. Okay? Now let me try f of 2. F of 2 will be 150 minus 25 times 2 is 50. That's 100. So far, so good. But let me just try one more, just to make sure. F of 3, that's 150 minus 25 times 3 is 75. That's 75. Is that the right number? Am I supposed to get 75 on the third attempt? No, I'm supposed to get 80. So that's not working. Okay? That's not working. All right, since I'd rather avoid fractions, let me try part A. Let me try part A. F of 1. That'd be 125 minus, well, 1 minus 1 is 0, so that would be a 0 here. So that's 125. That seems to be working okay so far. Okay? That's a 125. Let's try f of 2. That's 125 minus... if you plug a 2 into this equation, you get 2 minus 1. That's 1. 1 times 25 is 25. That's 100. Again, so far so good. All right. So let's try the third one. F of 3. So that's 125. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what I just realized? I'm subtracting. I should be adding, shouldn't I? I just realized I could have stopped right now. I apologize for that. I should be adding. My second number came out to 150. That automatically disqualifies it. I apologize for that. I thought it was subtracting. Okay, so I'm kind of stuck here, right? I got to use a fraction one. Which one should I try then? All right, D looks easier, right? Because C has a negative. Let's try D, okay? So, all right. If I try f of 1, that's 150 times 4/5 to the first, which is just 4/5. 150 times 4/5, or I guess let me divide. 150 divided by 5. What is that? That doesn't go in evenly, right? So I'm gonna need my calculator here. Let's just do the 4/5. So 150 times 4/5, that's 120. Is that the right number? No. So thank goodness, because that means B has to be my answer. I didn't have to spend any more time on that. Now, if that would have been 125, then I would have tried a power of 2 next. Okay? So again, all you're doing is testing this. And I know the equations could look really weird. Look at the ones on the right side. But just start with the easy ones if you'd like. And then from there, start moving on and testing other stuff. Okay? By the way, if you look over here, there's a chart. They're just saying if you plug in a 1, you can get a 6. If you plug in a 2, you get a 12, etc. Okay? And maybe we'll do that one just so you can see how to do that type of question. So we'll do this one, then we'll go to number 8. So you can see that type of question. So it says the first 5 terms of the sequence are 7, 10, 13, 16, and 19. Which of the following functions define the sequence for all integers n greater than or equal to 1? Meaning start with 1, go to 2, go to 3, go to 4, go to 5, etc. So I'd rather not try C or D if I can avoid it, because those look complicated. So let's try A. A and B look about the same. All right. If I plug in a 1 into part A, I get 3 plus 7. So that's 10. Is that my first number? No, right? I'm supposed to get what for my first number? A 7. So it can't be A. All right, well, let's try B. F of 1 is 4 plus 3, which is 7. Okay, so far so good. What's F of 2? Well, that would be 4 plus 3 times 2, that's 6. That gives me 10. Is that good still? Yeah. So, moment of truth. Going to plug in 3. And if I get 13, then I'm good. Okay? So I'm just going to plug in up here. F of 3, that's 4 plus 3 times 3 is 9. 4 plus 9, 13. Seems to be following the pattern. My answer is B. Okay? So a lot of times people will ask me, well, is there an easier way? There is, and I'm going to show it to you guys. Okay, instead of plugging all this stuff in, and I'm going to do number 8, which I'm not supposed to do because that's an even number, but it's a good one to try out. Okay? Is there a shortcut to doing this? So there is a shortcut to doing it. Okay, you use slope. Okay, you basically just use slope, and what you're going to do is you got to try to figure out how much is, this is kind of hard to say top, but these are the numbers you plug in, right? Like f of 1, f of 2. These are your n values, okay? Your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are your values that are changing over time. So instead of n, let's call it x, and let's call this y. You guys remember how to find slopes? Right? It's y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Or, to be more general, they say the change in y over the change in x. Okay? So I'm going to use this triangle because in math the triangle means the change in. So the change in y over the change in x. So let's look at how much y is changing over time. From 6 to 12, how much does it change? To go from 6 to 12. 6, right? Add 6. From 12 to 24, how much does it change? Well, that changes by 12, right? So this thing right here is changing, and this is changing by 24, etc. They're saying the table below shows the relationship between time and hours and the number of bacteria in the culture. Based on the table, what was the initial number of bacteria using the on-screen keyboard? In other words, how much was there at the very beginning? Well, that's starting at 1 hour past. How much was there at the very beginning at the 0 hour? So notice we're at 24, 12, 6. We're dividing by 2, right? Every time we're going down. So The 24 became a 12 because they divided by 2, right? The 12 became a 6 because they're dividing by 2, right? All this, if you divide 96 by 2, you get 48. 48 divided by 2, you get 24. 24 divided by 2, you get 12. 12 divided by 2, you get 6. I got to figure out 0. So I got to divide by 2 again. So my answer's 3. You just got to figure out the patterns, right? Look at the pattern of what's going on. So for all these numbers right here, they were basically dividing by 2 every single time. So to go to the initial point, when everything started, it's going to be 3, because that's what happens if I were to have a 0, there would be a 3. Right? Because then to go to 1, you got to double it. To go to 2, you got to double it. To go to 3, you got to double it, right? You got to keep doubling. So we're going to figure out, where did it start before? It was at 3. So it's just kind of trying to notice patterns. That's all they're trying to get you to do. Let me see. How much time do we have? 24. All right. I'm just checking to see if there's anything that doesn't look like it's going to be too easy. But maybe we'll do a 9, and then we'll do... I'm going to do 11. That way I don't have to worry about using a calculator. Okay? It's not that it's harder. It's just calculator based. That way I can try to do number 12 with you guys. 11 and 12. Okay? So consider this sequence: -10, -2, 6, and 14. Assuming the domain for the functions are positive integers greater than or equal to 12. In other words, start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which function makes sense? So let me give you guys a minute or so. Try to figure out which one you think is the right one. When you plug in a 1, you should get -10. When you plug in a 2, you should get -2. Okay, when you plug in a 3, you should get 6. Okay, which one of those 4 makes sense to you? So I'm just going to give you a minute. Just out of curiosity, has anybody figured out A, B, C, or D? You think it's D? What were you going to say? D? D? Yeah, it's going to be D. Okay. Again, which one should I start with? They all look pretty easy, the equations, right? But I do notice that A and B have negatives in the front, and I'd rather not deal with negatives. So I'd rather start with C or D. Okay? Whichever one you want. But you can start with any one. Okay? But me personally, I'd rather start with either C or D. When I try C, because that's probably the one I would have tried first. If I try part C, plug in a 1, that's 10 minus 8, that's 2. That doesn't work. So then I'm like, okay, well then I'll try part D. So I try f of 1 for part D. That's 8 times 1 minus 18. That's going to be -10. If I try a 2, 8 times 2 is 16 minus 18. That's -2. And just to be safe, I'll try one more. F of 3. And that's going to give me 8 times 3. That's 24 minus 18. That's 6. That seems to be making sense, right? I'm getting those numbers. So here you go. It's going to be D. If you tried A, your first 2 numbers worked. Did anybody try part A right away? And your first 2 worked, but the third one didn't. Right? So like I said, 2 is good, but 3 really guarantees that you're on the right path. All right? So here we go. Last one for you guys, and then you guys can work on the rest on your own. Consider this sequence generated. Here's a table. which equation is f of x? So this one's not asking us where did it start like the other one. This one's saying which one represents this equation. So in other words, your numbers are 8, -4, -16, -28. When you plug in a 1, you should get 8. When you plug in a 2, you should get -4, a 3, -16, right? A 4, -28. Which one of those 4 makes sense? Well, let's start. For me, if I had to choose where to start, what do you think I would pick? What do you think the easiest one is for me? Would I go with the negative x's first? I probably wouldn't. So it's either A or D. Which one do you think I'd try? D, because I don't have a calculator. I'd rather deal with 8 and 4s other than 20s and 12s, right? So I'm going to start with D. This could be wrong, but let's see. F of 1, I'm looking for an answer of 8. So that's 8 minus 4, that's 4. That's not good. All right, so that didn't work. So let's try A then, because that's the next one that would probably be easiest to do in my head here. So 20 times 1 is 20 minus 12, that's 8. So okay, so far so good. F of 2, I'm looking for an answer of -4. If I plug in a 2, 20 times 2 is 40. And 40 minus 12 is 28. And that doesn't make sense. All right, so then I do got to use one of the negative ones. Which one do you think I would try next? B, because I'd rather not deal with 12s and 20s, right? So I'm going to try 4s and 8s. So let's try f of 1. And by the way, it's not wrong to try any of these. I'm just trying to do the easier stuff for myself, right? I'm not trying to put myself in the hard situations right away. So trying to plug in a 1, this is -4 plus 8, which is a +4. Is that right? No, so that means my answer has to be C. Now I'm assuming that I did all my calculations right? But yeah, my answer has to be C because that's the only one. So if I wanted to check it, I could. Let's try f of 3 just to check some random one. -12 times 3 is -36, and -36 plus 20, that's going to be a -16. And notice, there you go, the third term was -16. So that one works. I didn't have to check it, I just did it just because. Okay, so the rest of them, guys, I want you guys to try them out. If you have any questions, please ask tomorrow. I know time's up in 3 minutes, so feel free to grab your devices and work on this homework.